Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. 2 days of joint practices are in the books, and it was fun. That's Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and it was hot also, so I'm quite sweaty. It is good to see you guys. Good to have all you here. Zach, how are you, man?
Doing good. Not very encouraged by today's Titans performance, but I will have to say that a few people that needed to step up or continue to step up are actually doing it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun the last 2 days. And first of all, we'll get to some injury updates here, some injury news. We've got the Calvin Ridley not running hard saga that is sweeping, coming to a radio station near you. We've got how well this team performed. We've got players that I think improved their stock. To your point, Zach, there are still plenty of guys that are stepping in to bigger roles and learning how to be very good members of this Tennessee Titans organization. So a lot of stuff to get to today. The game itself, we'll touch on it at the end. But by and large, Brian Callahan has already said all the starters are not going to play. Malik Willis is going to start. So not a lot to discuss other than some depth pieces and some roster battles maybe at the bottom of the roster for Saturday evening at Nissan Stadium at 6 o'clock. So should be a good weekend in preseason football. Sinkers Beverages, of course, our great sponsor. Shout out to them for just having a great selection of booze, man. just a lot of good booze. That's what they got there. Tons of beer. If you like craft and local, they've got tons of it. If you like big beer, they got tons of that too. They got tons of bourbon. They've got a great tequila selection. In fact, shout out to my guy Grant, who has done a great job. Zach, I'm a seeker when it comes to bourbon, and it's really hard to have two of those in your life. I can't also be a seeker and take time to learn all the nuances of every tequila out there. I can only have just bourbon. So I relied on Sinkers Beverages, and Grant was like, hey, this is the one you need. Your wife's going to like it for her drinks. You're going to like it for your drinks. It's perfect to sip on the rocks. It's also great to make with cocktails, and it's not too expensive. I said, give me that one, please. And I've been buying that one ever since. So
what is it?
It's a Rette, Arrete. I think that's technically a French word, I think. But I think that's how you pronounce it. Arrête. I don't know exactly, but I'm not going to say that again. So go check it out. It's very good tequila, and it's perfect for sort of all uses. And again, Sinkers Beverages are the folks who helped me find that booze of choice in the tequila world, and that's all I needed. Now I'm good to go on tequila. So check out Sinkers Beverages. Join the in crowd. Follow them on the socials. All that kind of good stuff. So lots of stuff to get to. Also in the show notes, both on the podcast and on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a little thumbs up.
Are we still doing this?
We would appreciate it. It's the last.
Have you not gotten enough negative feedback yet?
I'm a glutton for punishment, Zach. What can I say? No, we've not really mentioned it on the show until like the last 6 minutes, so I figured I'd do it on the front end of the show this time. And again, only a couple more days we're doing this, but answer a few questions for us. There's a link in the show notes on Twitter as well, my account as well as 440. And you can help us sort of figure out what's the best way to serve you, the audience, the best content that you like, when and where and how you like it. So it just takes about less than 5 minutes, very private. It's just for us to sort of get to know you guys better. It's linked in the show notes and on the socials, so please go check that out. Check out all the other great stuff that Zach does. You've got Football and Other Efforts. You got StackInTheInbox.com, our new Predators community, Lower Broad Hockey. We got you covered with Nashville SC stuff. We got you covered with everything, SEC football as well. So make sure you check out all the other great shows. Music City Audible, Paul Karski Podcast, Hot Read, all that other good stuff. Okay. All right, we'll get to the practices and the takeaway, but let's start with the injuries real fast. Kenneth Murray not in practice on Thursday, precautionary for a hamstring. Kyle Phillips shockingly left practice with an injury. Never heard that before. Hamstring after catching a nice pass in team drills. No Tyler Boyd, so it looked like Kyle Phillips got the first chance, and he got hurt. So there's that. Josh Wiley with a head injury. Looks like he hit his head on one-on-one, so you can assume a concussion to some degree maybe. And so he's out. And Marlon Davidson with the bicep. That, of course, is along with the fact that we did not see Snead, Awuzie, Hopkins as expected any of the 2 days. So the team is getting a little bit more banged up. I'm not super worried about it because we're still a ways off, but and the starters aren't going to play, but those are your injuries. Anything concerning to you in that group?
No, I like that they're very cautious in the sense of, okay, well, Kenneth Murray, he's experiencing a little hamstring tightness. I think previous regimes, dating all the way back to like Jeff Fisher, probably would have sent his ass out there risking it. And nothing may have happened. Something may have happened, at that point. And once he's out there, but I like that they're they're being cautious because like Cheetos sounds like it's really more precautionary than anything. Tyler Boyd's foot bruise or whatever seems more precautionary than anything. So like to me, it's just like all this stuff is like, look, it's preseason. These guys may or may not need the reps this week. They may not need the reps in preseason. So we're just going to kind of like take it day by day, case by case. And maybe it's indicative of a larger issue with some of these players. But for the most part, I kind of like that. Okay, Josh Wiley hit his head in the ground. We got about 30 minutes left of practice, if even that. Let's go send him on in.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with Kyle Phillips. But Kyle Phillips does sound like a actual hamstring injury.
Yeah.
We don't know the extent of it yet, but it couldn't have come at a worse time for Kyle Phillips anyways. Yep. But this is particularly bad because of other players that are starting to show some life.
Yes, and that'll be we will discuss that because without Tyler Boyd, there was opportunity to be had for Kyle Phillips, Mason Kinsey, and Jaquan Jackson, and we can discuss that coming up in just a minute. The Calvin, I think that's the point. Is Kyle Phillips is, if there was going to be a second slot receiver kept or a third or whatever the combination of names was going to be behind Tyler Boyd, and a guy who had to prove he could stay healthy gets hurt the second time he's practicing against someone other than his own team. It's not a good sign for Kyle Phillips, unfortunately, because I think he was in theory in the lead potentially for that slot. So
sort of like it just kind of depends on what their plans are at punt return. Because he's obviously going to have to show that, because I don't think it's going to be Tyjae Spears kick return, Tyjae Spears punt return.
No,
maybe it's Treylon Burks punt return, or maybe it's this or that. And we've only seen 1 week, and I don't know what it's been like at practice as far as who's taking the punts right now after the week, but you would have assumed that Kyle Phillips and Mason Kinsey may have gotten run similar to what the Jacksons did last week. You would assume that maybe someone else is going to get the run this week to maybe see what they can do. But now, no matter what they do, Kyle Phillips may not be involved. And it's kind of like, feels very Caleb Farley-esque to me, where it's kind of like, feels like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah,
if it's a serious injury.
Right. And I again, there's plenty of guys you root for and just want to see do well, and you're just like, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. Yeah. And that when he walked off, we were all like, okay, that sucks. So
yeah.
That being said, we'll get to I think Jaquan Jackson was maybe the star of the 2 days in terms of not like the biggest name, but like the guy who did the most for his stock. We'll get to that.
Sure seems like it.
We'll do that in just a second. So Calvin Ridley, look, I thought this was interesting because we talked about it as a group of folks yesterday. The only 2 deep shots that the Titans really took on Wednesday in team drills, really at all, were 2 shots from Levis to Calvin Ridley. And one was clearly a Ridley mistake in which he had his guy beat by a step. The throw was pretty good. And he tried to turn. He thought he got confused. He turned over he was running with inside, looking over his inside shoulder, and then he turned to his outside shoulder, but then turned back to his inside shoulder. And if you do that, you cannot run through the pass. And the ball landed about 5 feet from him. And had he just run through the ball straight forward, I feel like he would have made the catch. So I don't think that was an effort problem at all. So I think that part might be blown out of proportion on that particular pass.
I think if you have a general negative disposition, you probably will find issues with it.
But it was his fault. He made a mistake.
Yes.
But people make mistakes. It's I don't know if people know that on Twitter.
I thought I thought Callahan had a good. I don't know if you stayed for the presser, but I thought Callahan had a good. That's because the question was asked. I guess I can't remember how the question was phrased. So I don't even want to attempt it, but it's something along the lines of not being fast enough or not giving it his all. I don't want to get it. But either way, what you were talking about, he specifically brought up Jamar Chase and how everybody his rookie year thought the guy couldn't catch, he couldn't run, he couldn't do this and that. And I feel like it's just one of those things that's just not working right now. Doesn't mean that it's an issue, but you do have to keep in the back of your mind when you're assessing everything what happened last year in Jacksonville. Now, he's playing a totally different system. He's being used in a totally different way, but there were issues with communication between him and Trevor Lawrence being on the same page. I don't think that's going to be the case here if you take in the entire offseason of work that him and Will Levis have clearly put in. I just think that right now it's just not clicking, and they're just in a slump, and slumps happen.
So to your point about context, the second one, it seemed like we all at first were like, oh, Levis missed that pretty badly. Turns out Ridley didn't run through the ball on that one. And that's the one that I think he's talking about when Ridley himself says, hey, I didn't run hard enough on that. And the question was, and not to get into the question, but like to set up the context of Ridley himself in the conversation, because that Jacksonville context is important. And I don't think this is a big deal. Number one, let's start there. I don't think this is a huge story. I don't think it's a big story. But PK and I were talking about it before, and then he asked the question. And it was basically, is there anything to be concerned about with your big ticket, high priced free agent who does need to build rapport with the quarterback, who does have this thing with Jacksonville that needs to, is that concerning? And that Brian gave the answer that you gave. I think had he had a great 2 days of practice, this is a non-conversation. But he did not play well these 2 days. That I think is the key here. He played
better today. Is that correct? That's kind of how the reports read. Obviously, I'm not there. You are.
Literally the only time, and here's the problem, is you can't watch both. You have to pick, like, am I going to watch Titans offense this drill or Titans defense this drill? And you got to pick. And so you try to go back and forth, or you try to find a middle spot. I do not remember a single play Calvin Ridley made today. I don't remember one. The only one I can remember was in red zone where Devin Witherspoon beat him on an out route and knocked the ball away on a pass that Levis put, I think, where it needed to be. And so Witherspoon's a very good corner. Like, he's very good. He's going to win some battles. That's going to happen. But that was a team drill. And yesterday, I thought Ridley had a chance to make a couple of those plays. But even in one-on-ones, and this is the concern. It's not a concern. This is the context. Even in one-on-ones, Woolen, 27, who's like 6'3", 6'4", huge corner, tossed him around at the line of scrimmage. I posted a video of him getting like jammed and having his best catch, which is like a 5-yard crossing route. So if he had had a great 2 days of practice, I don't think we're elsewhere on the field. I don't think we're having a large conversation about this. Do I think it's important that he needs to continue to work with Will Levis, build rapport, and be productive? Of course, but like, I'm not super worried about it. But it wasn't, if you ask me, of the 10 stars on the team, let's say, like, pick the biggest names that have to be very good football players for this team to win, Calvin Ridley might be the one who is the best, who played the worst in these 2 days of practice. And that's kind of where I'm at with that.
I mean, that's what it kind of sounds like, right? I mean, you could probably make an argument that his counterpart is probably maybe he's not the best of that top 10, but he's definitely very important. He's not playing well, and that'd be Will Levis,
I agree.
especially today. So again, it's no cause for concern, because we have seen, people go out and never throw an interception at camp, then throw like 50 interceptions in the regular season. We've seen people that go on and throw interceptions at camp that don't throw interceptions in the regular season. And then we've seen that what happens in the preseason is indicative of what happens in the regular season. So, like, it's just kind of all over the map. And I get that we're supposed to sit here and analyze and talk about preseason, but at the end of the day, this feels kind of like one of those situations where nobody knows anything, because we don't know what these players are going to be later. Like, we really don't, I think Otis Reese and Chance Campbell are a prime example of that, in the sense that up until that preseason game, which has now sparked an uptick in their production and their flash plays, they were pretty much, I mean, this is kind of how you described it, but this is kind of how we've never heard any. You may have heard Otis's name once, but it's just because someone got a catch on him. Like, that's how it was up until the preseason game. Then preseason game, lights come on. Chance Campbell's on fire. He's a man possessed. Otis Reese is a man possessed. NPF looks great, but it's because the lights came on. And so sometimes, preseason stuff doesn't translate to what you see on the field. I will say this about this obsession with the deep shot. I don't think Calvin Ridley is necessarily, he's your best starting deep threat out of the three guys, but I don't think he's necessarily there to be the deep threat. I think that you got guys like Jaquan Jackson, Traylon Burks, and then you got other ways to threaten deep. And I'll say this, Coach Mack was on the radio this morning. It was Ramon Kalen Will. He called in. Now, He may not have called the offense this, because I had a hard time understanding what he was saying because he was yelling into his phone like my dad does. Uh, it was really hard to tell. But if he didn't say this, then I'm coining the term. But if he did say this, I have to give him
Okay.
He called this offense a chain aggressive offense, in the fact that it's not really about the big chunk plays and the explosive. It's about going down the field and getting first downs and moving the chains. And I'm in. I love that phrase. I think that's a good, smart way of doing it with the players that you have. Because you got to remember, DeAndre Hopkins is not out there. Tyler Boyd, those two guys fit that.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley fits that and another facet of your offense. Josh Wiley, Tajay Spears. Your offense is built to move the chains. Yep. And that's okay. Like, it may not be the thing that Titans fans want to hear, because they want to, when they hear modern offense, they're probably thinking like Patrick Mahomes improvisation plays and all this stuff. No, it's okay to have your modern offense still be mainly your short and intermediate game. And that's what they have the players for. And I think that people are overblowing basically everything around Calvin Ridley. Right. I just think it's overblown. Should you have your eye on it? Yes.
Yeah.
Should you be, obsessing over it? No.
Everything in camp is to be filed away for later. That's all. Everything in camp is like, okay. And I will disagree a little bit on Otis Reese in camp, because I think I said this on Monday and I want to reiterate it. Like, I think MPF, and to some degree I'd put him in this category. Chance Campbell had not flashed a lot of plays in camp until the game, and then the game happened, and now he had an interception today. I think Otis Reese had been making plays when on the field, some big thumps in the hole when he was filling against the run. Like, I thought Reese played in the game the way he had played in camp. I thought Campbell kind of overachieved, but all of this.
Can I say something about that? Because you told me on this show that it's Kenneth Murray and everybody else looks the same. Nobody separates them. They're all interchangeable. What Otis Reese did in the game on Saturday is not interchangeable with what Jack Gibbons does, with what other players do. So, like, to me, I mean, maybe the first analogy was unfair to Otis Reese. I don't know, but that's what you said. So that's what I'm.
I think both those things can exist. I guess the game to me wasn't as. This is tricky. I'm trying to figure out how to explain it, because I see your point. I would say that they are all similar and fairly interchangeable. I think Otis Reese eventually could be the best of the group, and frankly, he was the guy filling in for Murray today.
Yeah,
and
which makes sense.
And I think he has been the best of that group across the board, every practice and the game. And I guess I saw the game maybe because it was like he was running with the twos and playing against the threes for the Niners, and he made a couple of plays. And then I was like, I guess I didn't think it was as over the top, I suppose, maybe. But again, I want to go back to your point about just filing stuff away. Like, Levis and the deep shot, like, his arm, just because his arm is good enough to take the shots doesn't mean that he is going to be processing and accurate enough to use that part of his game at this point of his career. That's something that you want to develop and get to at some point. So there you go. Ed says, did half the chat room dive off the bridge yet? I'm assuming that's because
must be some busy Thursday right now.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah, where are you guys? So here's. Let's start with the fun stuff here, because it got pretty fun. And just sometimes you're out there and you're so stressed about, okay, well, that was Will Levis throwing to who on which one? That was the third play of the, okay, now it's the twos. And you just get so stressed out about making sure you chart everything or track everything or remember every big play or write down all the stuff that you just sort of, sometimes you get caught up in just some good old fashioned football shit. And twice that happened today, where in red zone, it was just building. The tension was building on every rep. And so the Seahawks sideline was in between the two fields. And so the Titans offense is on the near field, showcasing it for the fans against the Seattle defense. And then there's the Seattle players in the middle. And so they could just turn around and watch their defense and then turn around and watch their offense. And so they could celebrate. The backups, whoever wasn't playing, could celebrate a lot more, whereas the Titans were on the outside of each field, right? So just to give some context. So they start building and the tension starts building. All of a sudden, J.C. Latham's getting into it with Leonard Williams, and all of a sudden, Ojukwu's in the middle of a brawl. A brawl's a bad word. Just like a little, pushing and shoving after a snap. And then the pushing and shoving gets worse. And then the pushing and shoving gets worse. And then Latham's on his back and Leonard Williams is on top of him at the end of a play. And Rand Carthon has to, 2 arms, pass pro style, push J.C. Latham out of the pile. And I'm like, first of all, that would take a lot of strength to do that. But it's never.
It's like that mother whose child is stuck in the car and she has the adrenaline and lifts the car up.
Yes, that's right.
That's Rand Carthon.
Rand's like
full of adrenaline.
I've got to save my first round pick.
Mama Bear did.
Yeah, and that's basically what it did. And what was so fun though, it was not the outcomes of the plays, but it was the fact that the tensions were rising and that people were talking shit and people were having fun, and it never crossed over, but it was very intense, and that's just fun to be around. I was standing next to like Coach Mack and Greg Cosell, and everyone's just laughing the whole time. Chad Brinker's over here just laughing. Like it's, hey, we don't need to do this, but like also let's enjoy it and have fun. We're all football fans. And the team didn't play well in that period. Like the Titans didn't play well in that period on offense. Then we go into team, and it's the last drill of the 2 days. And it is both teams entirely on the same field. One offense is going to get to go until they can't, and then it's going to be like a game. Then the other offense comes on the field. And then we go to the twos, and then so it's a real sort of back and forth with 2 full sidelines. Jamal Adams, by the way, has not shut up in 3 straight days.
That's my favorite part of camp.
He's not shut up. He has not stopped talking. And then he had to take some on the back end here in a second. So Geno Smith goes out there, throws a long 40-yard touchdown to DK Metcalf. I think there might have been a holding call on the play, but it basically he pump fakes Quandre Diggs out of the play, and DK Metcalf strolls into the end zone on a 40-yard touchdown. Holding or not, they ended the possession, and they switch over to the Titans. First pass, Will Levis throws an out route to Mason Kinsey, and Devin Witherspoon picks it off. First pass. And then proceeds to...
That will teach Levis to throw it to Mason Kinsey.
And that's... Although the only touchdown in red zone was an out route to Mason Kinsey. So it just was fun. Like when it gets intense and it turns into like football, it's like fun again. And you're like, oh, I forgot this is so much fun. He is just screaming at Jamal Adams. He runs over and puts the ball in his chest, and Jamal Adams is not going to touch the ball, of course. And he's just like, here, dude, here. And he just keeps, and then the whole Seattle defense is there, and they're just talking so much shit to Adams, which is good, spirited football fun. And we're all enjoying it on the sidelines. And, Nick Westbrook-Akine's picking up flags and walking them over to the guy who committed a penalty. Like, yeah, look at this flag. Like, it's just fun. It's so much fun. I think the game is going to be kind of boring.
Probably.
But it was a lot of fun. It was very intense, but it never crossed over. Credit to both teams. Credit to both coaching staffs. Credit to everybody for like taking it up to the point where you love it and you lose track of the fact that you're trying to work, and then you just get to enjoy some football shit, which is dudes competing, physicality, some big hits, some noise, some loud noises, and it was a lot of fun. Analyzing the Titans' performance today, it was bad. It was bad. Brian Callahan said it. It was bad. At the very first drill, Zach, that I saw was one-on-ones, Titans DBs in red zone against Seahawks receivers.
They were getting smoked.
Now, it's one thing in one-on-ones with wide receivers and DBs. The receiver has a huge advantage. You got the whole field to work with. You don't have. It's also the best when your best cornerback out there is, or best defensive back is Jarvis Brownlee, Roger McCreary. Yeah. No, but here was the problem with the drill. Is that the Titans players were in position to make plays on almost every throw. And almost every throw, a person not named DK Metcalf was dominating in the air and catching every pass. Like they were 50-50 balls, and Seattle won every single one of them, I think. I can't even remember one where that wasn't the case. And so that was the start of it. Then we go to red zone, and I think there were 2 touchdown passes, Willis to Jackson and Levis to McKenzie. No one else scored. Chestnut had a running touchdown, but he kind of was allowed into the end zone in the last second there. The red zone didn't go well. The 2-minute didn't go well. The team drills didn't go well. The one-on-ones didn't go well. They were better on Wednesday, but the Seahawks got the better of them on Thursday and dominated the game. It dominated the game for however you want to call it. So that the overarching takeaway is the Titans got a lot to learn and a lot to take away from this. And then we'll get to some of the good players in a second. But overall, Seattle won the 2 days, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's, it is what it is right now. It's disheartening for sure. I mean, no DeAndre Hopkins probably changes a lot more than what we gave it credit for. It probably affects the game plan, affects coverages of the defense. DeAndre Hopkins, and let's not forget no Tyler Boyd too. I mean, but I do think that DeAndre Hopkins, I think shades of struggles were evident before the Seahawks game when DeAndre Hopkins has been missing practices, and now it's just getting magnified because also Tyler Boyd is gone. And I think that's really more to do with the connection that Will Levis has with DeAndre Hopkins that has been well established. And that there's a level of comfortability there that probably is not there for Nick Westbrook-Akine or even Treylon Burks at that level.
Yep.
Even though Treylon Burks had a really good day, right? He's put together some really good practices outside of the cramp that he had yesterday, which, like, can these guys start eating bananas or drink Gatorade on the sidelines? I mean, what's with all these cramps?
It was the longest, hottest practice I have ever been a part of at any level. It was like a 2.5-hour practice.
He mentioned dead legs, like people.
I've never seen that.
Dead. And I think that again, Calvin Ridley and his connection is growing. It's evolving. It's not where it was with DeAndre Hopkins, obviously. It's not where it hasn't even really caught on as quick as what him and Tyler Boyd did. Of course, Tyler Boyd's easier routes to throw to, and he's a little bit more experienced than Calvin Ridley and getting to places in this offense, too. You got to remember this. Tyler Boyd has an advantage in this kind of offense. Calvin Ridley's kind of learning this offense. So I get it. It's a little. That's why I think the run game is working a little bit better than the pass game. I also think that this isn't San Francisco's backups and third stringers. This is a really good defensive line that is really putting the pressure on guys like J.C. Latham, putting the pressure on Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry. Sounds like NPF and Radin/Rupchich are kind of doing good things. This is to be expected. I think anybody who came in thinking that Seattle with a deep, talented, experienced roster wasn't going to win the 2 days. Like maybe overall, because I guess, you can give the edge a little bit to Tennessee yesterday, but overall, this team should be looking better than the Tennessee Titans, regardless of a new head coach, because it's theoretically a better head coach that hasn't worn out his welcome, but it's still the same players, the same experienced players that have been through this. And the Tennessee Titans have a lot of inexperience in the worst places, cornerback being one of them.
Yeah. I mean, Brian Callahan gave a lot of kudos to Mike McDonald today. That can't be a guy that we all loved as a potential pick for the Titans, and then turn around and say, "Oh, he's garbage for the." Like, of course not. He's a very good coach. The scheme is very good. Gave him a lot of trouble in red zone in 2 minutes, as Brian Callahan said today. No, I think, and we can kind of, in general, to your point, I thought if you were to make these games, like make these 2 days of practice like a score of a game, I would say a close victory by the Titans on Wednesday. I thought it was sort of a pretty balanced, evenly matched practice, maybe a 24-21 or 27-24 kind of win. And then today I thought it was like a 2-touchdown win by the Seahawks, if you wanted to sort of put that analogy on it. We can get to some of the stuff that was good, because I thought the running game yesterday on Wednesday in particular was quite good. There was another big long run today as well where they did a pretty good job blocking. They had a trap play in red zone where Chestnut, it broke completely wide open, and Chestnut sprinted towards the goal line. The linebacker kind of pulled up and didn't hit him, but it was a very well executed play. I think Pollard and Spears have both been really solid players over the 2 days. No surprise there. To your point, the offensive line has had some good moments in run game, and that's what we talked about on Monday. I think Latham is going to be a great run blocker this year. I think it's going to take a little time for his pass sets since pass pro. I think Rupchich and Radins are battling for the right guard spot. I think MPF has got it all but locked down, right tackle. In fact, Stoney, if you're listening, earmuffs. I think Ojukwu might be the odd man out, honestly, of the 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever that they keep. He might be the first guy that misses. So I thought the right side of the line was pretty good. I thought the defensive line was pretty solid. Certainly was very good yesterday on Wednesday. Simmons, Sweat, Day, those three, I thought did a very good job of collapsing the pocket when they're in there. Hard to block those three. But I mean, honestly, the two guys who played the best over the 2 days outside of the running backs is probably Treylon Burks and Jaquan Jackson. Excuse me. Those two guys are the two guys that I thought played the best. They both made big plays yesterday. They both made big plays today. And if it wasn't for those two guys making plays, there wouldn't have been a lot of guys making plays. But I think it's a good sign that Jackson might have the edge on the Kinsey Phillips-Jackson battle for a roster spot because he can return punts and he can play the slot, and he's always in the right place, it seems like. Very smart football player. And Burks, he still goes down too easily, but he is out there making plays with the first team against the top Seattle Seahawks defensive backs. And he was easy. He got off the line really well yesterday. You could not check him at the line of scrimmage. Made a big play yesterday. Made another big play on the first play of team drills today. He made a big play, a little like a post crossing route, turned it into a big, huge chunk play. So I thought Burks and Jackson were probably the two biggest stock up guys over the 2 days. And that's a good sign for a team that's missing Boyd and Hopkins.
When we talked on Monday, we talked about how, Jaquan Jackson, he's the guy that you kind of need to see keep going. You need to see him with the 2s. You need to see him with the 1s. And we talked about on Football and Other F Words on Tuesday as well, is that that's the guy I was looking for, Jaquan Jackson. And to me, Kearis Jackson had a good day in 1v1s yesterday, but then you didn't hear anything about Kearis Jackson today. I feel like there's just a lack of consistency with him. And that shows up in games too, the way that he drifts in routes and all kinds of stuff. Jaquan Jackson, I went back and watched all 22. And I don't know if you are an all 22 or rewatched the broadcast. I don't know which one you do. But if you watch the all 22, you have a totally different feeling. And I saw the vision with Jaquan Jackson. Like the vision when they drafted him that I struggled to see in his draft, in the draft, in his college tape. Why did they draft him over maybe, some of these other wide receivers? Why did they wait to the 6th round to draft him? I saw the vision, and it echoed what you said on the Thursday show going into the preseason game against the 49ers is like, he's open a lot. They just don't ever throw him the ball. The quarterback that he's saddled with doesn't throw him the ball. And that quarterback that he was saddled with was who he was saddled with on Saturday. And for whatever reason, Jaquan Jackson was relegated to 3rd string, 11 personnel only. I mean, he was the 3rd wide receiver for whatever reason. He was with Malik Willis, and he had 8 different routes, and he was wide open on almost all 6 of them, but he was open on 6 of the 8. And either Malik Willis just didn't look his way, hesitated and tuck and ran, or just didn't, there's one play where he just stared Jaquan Jackson down. Jaquan Jackson was open, and it's like you could just feel like he's looking at him, but is he looking at him? Does he think Jaquan Jackson's invisible, and he just takes off and run? And for less yardage than we would have got if he would have thrown it to Jaquan Jackson. Now, there's still issues with Jaquan Jackson's game, but he was drafted. I think that's been the big thing for me in this 6 wide receiver battle, which Brian Callahan kind of alluded that, we're talking about 6 wide receivers. We're not talking about 7. You need to get your mind, and this is on the Wednesday presser. He kind of said 6 wide receivers. And we talked about this on Monday. We talked about this on the football show. Your kick returner is not important as far as the wide receiver that ends up taking that job, because more than likely it's Tajay Spears and somebody else. Probably could be Hassan Haskins, could
Treylon
be
Burks,
Chestnut, could be Treylon Burks, which, I mean, have you seen Treylon Burks on the kickoff return receiving lately?
Not this week, but last week we did. Yep.
Okay, good. Well,
but I haven't seen Spears. I haven't seen Spears out there either. So
yeah. Well, I think maybe Spears has enough that they're probably not worried about it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm at, right? It's those 2 guys. So I'm not. It's really more about the punt returner. That's where we landed on the football and Other F Words was whoever wins the punt return job, if that is a wide receiver, if that is the wide receiver, that's your sixth wide receiver. And right now, I would say that's Jaquan Jackson because he's also drafted. Like Mason Kinsey was not drafted by this regime.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a tie to the GM. He doesn't have a tie to the coaching staff. He doesn't have a tie. Jaquan Jackson does. And Jaquan Jackson is doing enough in practice now, gaining momentum every week. I mean, he made 2 big plays yesterday that resulted in touchdowns with yards after catchability and speed. He made another touchdown today. I looked at those throws, those 8 throws, right, that from preseason Saturday against the 49ers. And I'm like, man, Malik Willis missed them. Why didn't Malik Willis throw it? And then I'm thinking, those are Will Levis throws. Like those routes that Jaquan Jackson was running, how open he was, where he was on the field, those are Will Levis throws. Like, and then you saw it yesterday with Mason Rudolph on Wednesday. You saw it with Mason Rudolph, a better quarterback, and he connected on those kinds of throws.
He took an
I think Will Levis is the same way.
He took an 8-yard slant route, 70 yards. Yeah. Mason Kinsey cannot do that. I'm sorry, Mason.
Neither can Kyle Phillips.
No disrespect.
We got to be honest. Neither can Eric Jackson can even run that route more than likely in a game.
No disrespect. But then again, and that was with Rudolph. So as soon as he got elevated to the second team, he was making plays. Then he got elevated to the first team, and he actually caught his touchdown today, a really solid touchdown catch, which was like from the 5-yard line. It was from Malik Willis, actually, ironically. Willis actually found him in the back of the end zone. He gets hit real hard, pops up, touchdown. It was one of only 2 passing touchdowns during the red zone drill that they probably had like 15 reps, let's say. They only scored twice in terms of the pass. One was Levis to Kinsey on an out route to the corner pylon, and one was Willis to Jackson. But, like, look, to your point, who's the best punt returner right now of the group? It's Jaquan Jackson. Who's the best receiver of the group? It is Jaquan Jackson. And who is the guy who's most invested by this regime? Jaquan Jackson. Like, to me, this is not a decision anymore. Like, it's 19 is on the team. 19 and 16 made all the biggest plays.
Week of practice, right? This week of practice cements
I think so. Yeah.
His standing among the other wide receivers behind, NWI and Traylon Burks. Out of all those slot receivers that they got, which they got like 15 of them for whatever reason, Jaquan Jackson is the guy. You see, I saw it just like it was a light bulb moment, if you will, when I'm watching that all 22 and I'm like, okay, there's what Braden is talking about. But then I took it a step further. I'm like, that's what Tyke Tolbert saw.
Yep. This
is what Brian Callahan saw. Like, that's where I'm at, because he's doing routes and getting open for throws that an NFL starting quarterback can make without hesitation. And that's Will Levis. And they're deep throws. They're like 15 to 20 yards down the field. Those are Will Levis's bread and butter. It gives you something different than Tyler Boyd in the slot. You can put him in motion. You can get him, on some jet sweeps probably. I see the vision. Now, there's a long way to go for Jaquan Jackson's development. He and
no question.
We talked about it with Easton Freeze this week. He said that they're focusing on beating press using his feet first, his hands second, because a lot of people want to use their hands and get physical and think that's the way you beat press. But Tyke Tolbert said it's more natural for a wide receiver to do that with their feet, especially Jaquan Jackson. So he's working on that. And the other thing is that, like, he's got to learn how to be in the huddle, which shouldn't be really that hard of a thing to learn. But apparently, he gets all of his plays off ball in 2 lanes. So learning in the huddle, take it in 2 plays at once, to execute back to back if necessary. That's a learning curve. But if you're going to take the guy, if you're going to have that as his knock, all of his pros are so much better than anything that any of these other guys provide. And Tyjae Spears said that guy is all business. Jaquan Jackson is all business. And to me, that's the guy you keep. And I hope that he makes our draft day analysis of when he got drafted and a couple days after look foolish. I hope he does. I hope he makes, and I think he's going to. I really do think he's going to make us eat our words.
I love Willie Fritz coach, guys. And Willie Fritz was the Tulane coach. He's now at Houston. I imagine you're going to see Houston players popping up in the draft here in the next couple of years, because that guy is a stud of a coach. And the scouting report on Jackson was the guy knows ball. Like, he works hard. He's a professional. He is in the right place at the right time. He's had some injury problems, but he's in the right. He knows how to execute the position in a professional manner. And look, we're talking about number 6 on the depth chart here. Like, he's not being asked to be number 2 or number 3 or number 4. He's number 6. And I think it's all there for him to be the number 6 receiver on the team. And I think he's probably already there. What's interesting, and I want to ask you this about Burks, because I think if he is fully healthy and sort of focused and polished, I'm not sure anyone can stop him off the line of scrimmage, like, honestly. And Woolen is such a big dude. And I thought it was interesting because Burks was tossing Weatherspoon around. Very good corner, but much smaller. I thought it was interesting that Seattle chose to sort of opposite match the two guys in one-on-ones and team drills. They would put Woolen on Ridley, and Woolen would dominate that physically. But then they would put somebody else on Burks, and then Burks would dominate that matchup physically. So I don't know what people are going to do, if they're going to take their big, strong physical corner and try to put him on Burks, or if you just sort of acknowledge you're not going to jam Treylon Burks on the line if he turns into the guy consistently that we think he can be. Because, again, you watch people roll up on him and try to press and keep him on the line, and like he could toss you around like a rag doll. He's so big, so big and strong. But he's going to have to become the player he's supposed to be for that to happen. And that still is a long way off. I thought it was a really good 2 days for Treylon Burks. I thought those 2 days of practice show me sort of proof of concept that that he's starting to put it together. It does not mean we should raise expectations for him to be more than a good number 3 on this team and like a good fill-in when somebody's hurt, if Hopkins is hurt, as is the case right now. But I thought it's a really good step this week for Treylon Burks. I thought it was a good step for the running game, good step for the defensive line. Adams and Diggs, I think, had their moments of like being the veterans that they are, and then they had a lot of rusty moments also. And I think that's to be expected, especially when all your corners are out. So that's also a factor. DK Metcalf had a field day for both days. He did whatever he wanted. But again, if you're going up against Trey Avery and Jarvis Brownlee and Eric, like, those are the guys you should be. DK Metcalf should be beating those guys. I'll say this: Geno Smith has a better arm in person than I expected. That's just a random observation. That's just a random observation. Like he like flicked it one time on a penalty. It was a free play, and he just like flicked it like 40 or 50 yards in the air downfield, and it ended up being a really incredible interception by the Titans, but like it was an offsides penalty, so free play. All right, Sinkers Beverages. Make sure you swing by in East Nashville. 3-time liquor store of the year in Nashville. Sinkers Beverages. They got good gear. Like, check this out. They got the cool logo there. I got the black hat on. They got all kinds of good gear in there, good merch, all kinds of bar equipment too. If you're in there and you're missing some glasses, different types of glasses, you need one of the shakers. You need something good for the bar. They've got really cool options in there as well, along with all the great booze and the great wine selection, the great beer. And of course, if you search Uber Eats, you can have that booze delivered directly to your house.
They drive so you can drink.
Honestly, Zach, it was a really fun 2 days. It was my favorite 2 days of camp every year. I thought that the questions I have about the Titans still exist. I thought some players made some progress, and I think Seattle is a slightly better football team. And I think that's what I saw over the 2 days. I don't really think I'm making any grand sweeping changes on my opinion of the Tennessee Titans based on the 2 days of practice. I think they are I don't want to say bottom third team in the league, but I think they're at the top of that bottom third maybe, or the bottom of the second third. I don't know. But I think they're right around. I'm not sure I've changed my opinion too much about this team so far.
I don't think anything should really, after the draft, I think that your perception of the Tennessee Titans or any football team should kind of like coast until you start seeing them play meaningful games, until you start seeing them play. Like, in the first few weeks, you'll kind of know where this team is trending, right? Like, if you thought they were going to be, 10-4 or 10-5 or 10-6 last year, 10-6, I guess, right? 10-7 last year.
17 game season.
Yeah. 10-7 last year, and you watch the first 3 games, you're probably bringing that down. You're probably like, hey, let's pump the brakes. Probably not going to be 10-7. This year, I think it's fine to just kind of look at it and be like, okay, this is we kind of think that maybe they could be a playoff team, or you think that maybe they're probably picking in the top 15 still, and nothing really should change at this point. If you're maybe one of the playoff team people, you may think that, okay, well, maybe they're picking top 15. But once the games start, once you start seeing the full complement of defensive weapons, the full complement of offensive weapons, and they start gelling and doing all this stuff, your opinion will maybe likely change, because they're going to look like a totally different team than what you're even seeing this week.
I think so. I agree with the coast. I think that's a good analogy. Like, if you thought they were a 10-win team, you should probably not adjust it too much. If you thought they were a 4-win team, you probably shouldn't adjust it too much. I'm in the middle. I don't think they're a playoff team, and I don't think they're a top 5 pick team. I think they're in that 7-win range, and I would still probably say 7 wins. I think 7 wins is about where I'm at with this team. That's probably where I was at before the camp started. It's probably where I was at before the 2 days of practice this week, and it's probably where I'm at after these two. I think if they get to 7-10, right? That's the right record, 7-10.
Yeah.
I think if they get to 7-10, there will be plenty of good things to build on. There'll be plenty of holes that they need to fill, but there'll be plenty of good things that you can point to and say, all right, we figured that out. We figured that out. We figured that out. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I think I saw a Seattle team that might be a slightly bit better, maybe an 8 or 9 win team,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I saw. And so I don't think making any big sweeping gestures or changes to your opinion is probably smart. Ed says, are we reaching a point where seeing Snead out there for at least for a practice or a week are we reaching that point? And he's a veteran player. I almost don't want to rush anybody back at this point for practice. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Awuzie is in the same boat, honestly. So
yeah, I don't need to see. I personally just don't need to see him.
I mean, did he practice in camp last year?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think he did either. So what about the game? Willis is going to get the start, and I think here's the thing. You said, I don't know exactly how you worded it earlier in the show, Zach, but you said we've got to figure out what we've got in some players, and so they're getting opportunities to sort of get out there and say, all right, Mason Kinsey was running with the ones today. Same as Jackson, and same they were rotating the guys into the slot because they were going to see what they had in these guys, right? Kiaris Jackson as well. I think Willis is getting the start because they need to see what they've got with him. Like I think he's made some slight progress, but it is very clear that Mason Rudolph to me is QB2. I'm not adjusting that. I haven't seen enough progress in Willis's game to suggest that he should be challenging for QB2. I thought Mason Rudolph actually had a pretty good week of practice. He had a couple of bad throws today, but he was very good yesterday. I don't know. Doesn't that I heard that Willis was, when Callahan said that, I was like, oh, they're going to give him every possible advantage they can, and it might be his last chance. I don't know. Is that too dramatic?
Yeah, probably. But I do think it is for them to see what they got. And I think it's to see, okay, here you are with a couple different better versions of what you had. And listen, his offensive line was actually performing really well for the most part. I don't think they were really as terrible as what he's had to deal with. But I do think that this point is like, we're trying to figure out what he is and what he is to this team. And I think they're probably asking him to, let's see what you can do with
better surrounding cast.
Way to put it. Let's see what you can do in a game against better talent. And this idea that Mason didn't look good versus the 49ers, he did look good with the 49ers, against the 49ers. You got to go back and watch the tape. He looked better than Willis. He may not have looked great, but he looked better than Willis. The
point is in practice, Rudolph has been significantly better for the entire game.
Well, I mean, he's the quarterback too. They're not here's how you need to view it. And maybe you are kind of right. It's more of, okay, we know that Mason Rudolph's number 2. Do we carry Malik Willis on the roster? I think you do, unless he's just flat out terrible. I do think you carry him on the roster, because I don't know who else the Tennessee Titans would keep else that would really matter, unless they are going to keep like a 6th linebacker or 7th wide receiver or 5th tight end or something like that. Like I think Mike put it best. You're keeping 53 people on the team. Okay, you're keeping 53 people. Malik Willis is maybe 53. That's kind of how he put it. I don't know if I still agree with that, but that's kind of how he put it.
That's why I meant by like last chance is like you got to earn. This is if you play really well with a better supporting cast in a better situation where you've had a couple of days to prepare as the starter. Then of course, okay, you could see the argument for keeping him. You know what I mean? Talented kid, works hard, does all the right things. Like you could see the argument. If you give him all this stuff and all this situational stuff and all this support, and then he goes out and still does the exact same things that we have been trying to see him evolve out of for 2 straight years, it just might be the player that he is. And that's not, it just is what it is, man. By the way, quick note here. This just hit me while we were talking because you mentioned the offensive line. The second offensive line, I want to make sure. I think I got this right. I think it's Rupchich at right guard. He's battling for start. You got Brunskill. You got Christian at left tackle. At times, you've had a Ojukwu in there. You've had Jalen Duncan in there as well. I'm missing one. I can't remember who the left guard was, who's the backup. But that backup group has played fairly well relative to their station in life, if that makes sense, to your point. And 2 other names that I've got to make sure we mention here, and I can already hear your eyes rolling. But Thomas Odukoya had a really good day yesterday, and David Martin Robinson had 2 really good days.
You didn't listen to this week's Football Under the Efforts because I think they're keeping 4 tight ends.
I think there's a chance. Both those guys played very well in camp, both these 2 days.
Yeah.
So
well, and Mike brought up that Thomas Odukoya with that first string offense got some snaps on preseason. He's like, well, that kind of feels like the Nick Vannett role, right? Like, okay, Nick Vannett's not in. Thomas Odukoya is kind of playing this guy that kind of does both things. And
in team drills on
looks good.
In team drills on. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying. I think that.
Okay.
I think tight end 4 is a real possibility.
Okay. In team drills on Wednesday, day 1 of the practice with the Seattle, he absolutely, like, he was flattening a few people once in blocking and then once as a receiver. And so and he's done that in camp with the Titans too, like just within his own team. So and then I think DMR had a couple of catches today and yesterday. I don't know who it's going to be of the 2. I would assume it's Odukoya over Robinson because I think he's a better blocker. And I think we saw that, like he flattened a few dudes on some running plays.
My big thing is shit or get off the pot with Thomas Odukoya.
Yeah, that's why PK is so obsessed with the international slot. He's like, "What are you going to do? Are you going to use it or not? What are we doing here?" Like it's just.
Well, I think it's time to if you are not going to put Thomas Odukoya on this roster, let him go. He feels like a guy that deserves a chance to go somewhere where maybe he could be used.
Free Odukoya.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a little ridiculous because he plays really well. It's not just in practice. It translates to, and it may not be splash play after splash play, on preseason, but it does translate to preseason games. It's like Otis Reese. Like what Otis Reese does translate to games. Like let's put the guys that have the attributes and put in good practices, put in good preseason games. Keep those guys. Put those guys on the roster. That's put the good players on the roster. That's where I'm at.
Guys who do good football things should be on football teams.
Yes.
Yes. Jacob, I think it was Latavius Simmons that is the left guard right now at the backup spot. So I do think, again, there's positive things to be taken. I think the lines of scrimmage are improved over last year. And I think that's a good positive thing. I know you, by the way, we can wrap this up with Arden Key if you want, because I know you wanted to pay attention to Arden Key. He was still out there taking reps with the ones. There's some theories floating around just on the sidelines. The first thing, and I think fans kind of know this, but it's worth reiterating. You don't alert the team of any decision until after all of the processes have taken place, right? So, like, if you get a suspension, you've notified the player, and then the player appeals, and the appeal takes place, and you go through the whole process. Like, that's what could be holding up the decision, and before they have to final.
This seems like the longest appeal I've ever seen,
and
that's just how it feels.
And no, I don't disagree. And how many times does anything related to, like, if it's PED related? How many of those have ever been overturned on appeal? Like very, very few. Right. Here was the theory that was floating around the sidelines, which is because you're risking it by playing him with the ones if you know he's going to be out. You also want to get some other guys some reps, whether that's Rashad Weaver or Jalen Harrell or whoever it might be, right? Like you don't want to risk injury, and you want to get some guys reps. There is a theory that says maybe he is the number 2. We just don't know it yet.
I mean, it kind of feels that way regardless, right? That he is the number. He is. Wait a minute. You're saying
we don't have the number 1 on the roster yet. That's the theory. That's the concept
I'm
floating
so
around.
Because Harold Landry's the one, right?
Sorry, I'm on his side. Let's say
okay.
That
so but who's the number 1? Because that guy
we were asked about
free agency.
I'm not suggesting there's a lot of options, but we did talk about trading for Hassan Reddick, for example. I'm just saying that was.
So you guys are living on Dream Street over on the sideline.
It was very hot.
I like a good conspiracy theory. Just,
it was very hot. It was very hot.
Listen, if they trade for Hassan Reddick, I'd again, of course, be very ecstatic. I look at it this way. I do think it's very interesting that that the NFL is taking its sweet ass time with this, which is to me, just very interesting. And of course, there is an appeals process, but you think that appeals would have already gone through.
I agree.
Because obviously Brian Callahan is also waiting on this, because he said, whenever we hear about his suspension, which made it sound like essentially, well, the suspension's coming, we just don't know how much it is or how big the game is, then we'll adjust our snaps. And they haven't adjusted snaps yet. So I just think that's very...
No, as soon as the league...
Especially because he played in the first preseason game, too.
As soon as the league tells the team officially for the first time, then it will be told to the public. And we'll all know when the league tells the team what the ruling or verdict or decision is. We'll know all of that. But this is the player coming to the team and telling him this is what's happened, or this is what's going on. Like, the league is not obligated to tell the teams that this is happening. They tell the player, and then the player tells the team. So when they get it's only because everything needs to be kept under wraps. Like, it needs to be kept controlled. It needs to be kept done behind closed doors so that they get to the actual final decision. And then once they get to the final decision, it is then like, here's our decision, Titans. You know what I mean? Like, and then the Titans become the first thing that's told about this, but not until the decision has been made. So it is curious that the decision has not yet been made. That is worth, it is curious. So maybe that means there's some maybe the appeal has more weight than we thought. Maybe it's reduced or something. I'm not trying to get anybody's hopes up. It is curious that it's taking so long. That's all. So,
yeah.
But there you go.
But it is curious. Listen, here's just real quick, since it's the last preview show. I'm interested in Jaquan Jackson. I'm going to be looking at Jaquan Jackson all through that all 22 at the broadcast. I'm going to be looking for number 19. Obviously, the third running back battle is still brewing between Julius Chestnut and Hassan Haskins. I'll turn off the TV if I see Jabari Small on the TV. I'll just tune out. Will not focus. I'm still here for Bryce Oliver. Nobody roots harder for Bryce Oliver than me. I fully understand that he's not making this team, but he can at least be next year's NWI. He is the undrafted free agent that will finally get NWI off the roster. So rooting for I'm rooting for Bryce Oliver in 2024 to get Bryce Oliver in 2025. That's where I'm at. Obviously, the 4 tight end thing, I'm looking at Thomas Adekoya and David Martin Robinson. Not that concerned with Steve Stylianos at this point. Other than that, I mean, like, linebackers are still important, right? And to see, I don't know how many of the starters are playing, if the rookies will actually play, if none of the starters are for real going to play. But if NPF and Radens do play, if Latham plays and Sweat plays, I'm looking for that next jump from them in week 2, either maintain consistency or be better. And if they're not playing, I'm looking at Andrew Rupsich and Cole Spencer. Like, that's where I'm looking at. I would find it very interesting. Like, if, let's say that Dylan Radens doesn't play, but Andrew Rupsich does. If Andrew Rupsich doesn't play, but Dylan Radens does, and we were told starters aren't playing. So just something put out there.
Well, and what's funny is you can make the case, just like with the Willis argument, that he's out there to get the chance to prove that he belongs in the conversation. You could spin it both ways. You're like, no, Radens is out there because we want him to get more reps with the ones or as a player. No. Radens is out there because Rupchich is the starter. Like you could spin it both ways. I do not expect to see 4 of the 5 starting linemen. I think Latham's out, Cush is out, Skoronski's out, and NPF's out. I don't think either of I think to your point, you might see a rotation at right guard trying to determine who the starter is because they're evenly matched at this point, maybe, or more even than we think. So I think 4 out of the 5 starters are out. I don't know if we see Sweat or Simmons or I think all those guys are out. I don't think, and we know Simmons is, but I don't think Sweat's going to play. I think you're right. It's Chance Campbell, it's Otis Reese, it's Thomas Odukoya, it's Jaquan Jackson.
I'm assuming no Cedric Gray, right? But he hasn't been out there, I would assume.
Talk about a guy who's just like out of sight, out of mind.
He's falling behind, man. I feel bad for him. Of course, James Williams. I'm looking for James Williams, but man, this thing with Cedric Gray is not great.
Yep. Gabe Judy Lolly, that's one to watch. I think that's a guy to watch that's out there as well. So, and then I think Jalen Harrell, all the rookies, like you said, Jalen Harrell, Thomas Rush, Rashad Weaver, you know, Caleb Murphy. You want to see somebody make some plays. So let's see what happens. So should be interesting. It's all the guys battling. There's probably like, what do you think? Like 15 guys battling for like 4 spots at like 7 different positions.
I don't know. It kind of feels like it. I'm working on going through a final 53 and kind of doing like a first one out, last one in, or is the last one in, first one out? That's what it is. Last one in, first one out.
I think we can all agree that number 53 is Malik Willis.
Yes, more than likely.
It sounds rude and disrespectful. I don't mean it to be. I'm not trying to pick on him. He's a good kid. All right. That just about does it. Sinkers Beverages. Fill out our questionnaire. Support good local journalism. Stackingtheinbox.com. Lowerbroadhockey.com. You got all the other shows covering the Titans. You got the Kaharski podcast. You got everybody else. So make sure you support all the great shows across the network. We do appreciate your support. Thumbs up on YouTube, please. Tell somebody about the show if you are a fan and you like this product. Please say, hey, I got a couple of knuckleheads I think you need to listen to. They know what they're talking about with the Titans. It's a fun show. We never take ourselves too seriously. Like, just come tell somebody to come hang out and let's grow the audience and have a good time. So otherwise, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game at Nissan Stadium. You are not going to enjoy getting there or parking or going to the game in that process, but you will enjoy the football inside the stadium once you're there. So otherwise, Sinkers Beverages for all your needs during your Saturday night Titans football game. For Zach, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.